Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Political Vigilante. We are here with another Skype supporter on the Patreon. You too can do this at the $25 level if you go to GrahamElwood.com. Excuse me. Well, GrahamElwood.com will do it, but if you go to patreon.com/GrahamElwood, that's the quicker way to do it. And then we can do a Skype interview like this, and we can discuss whatever you want to talk to. So this is the second time we've spoken to Danny, who is also in Frankfurt, Germany. Danny, guten Abend.
Guten Tag.
Because I believe
it's midday.
It's a little after 9 there. Is that right?
Yeah, after 9:15 in the evening.
Okay. So one of the things, obviously in America, immigration is a huge topic, and one of the things that was driving, especially going into the last presidential election, was, Trump wants to build this wall. Chuck Schumer is probably going to give him the money for it because that's what Democrats do. They completely acquiesce, and then they say they're resisting and fighting for us when they're not. But one of the big issues going into the 2016 election was all of the refugees coming to Europe, mainly Syrian refugees. That's what America does. We bomb the shit out of a place, and then we act surprised when people have to leave there. So there was a lot of, in my opinion, and you can shed some light on this, misconceptions about how immigration was being dealt with and looked at in European countries. So why don't you tell us your impression of how you view immigration in Germany and how it's been treated on a political level, how people are talking about it culturally and socially.
Okay, so it's the third big migration discussion we're having in Germany in my lifetime. The first one people tend to forget was around 89, 90, when just before reunification, people were treating Eastern Germans as migrants, as foreigners, something. Then again in the late 1990s, during the civil war in Yugoslavia, there was again a big migration discussion. This one is a little bit different because it seems to be, from the very beginning, to have been much harsher and already coming into smaller prior discussions that there were. But maybe if you can paint a picture for me, just so I can relate better. If I would ask average Joe on the street, tell me what you think the situation is in Germany or in Europe right now with the migrants. Because sometimes I feel like when I listen to American politicians, that they think like we're almost about to have a civil war here, or everything is collapsing and there's riots on the street. Yeah,
that's the image. And that's the thing. I mean, so American media, which helps fuel American politics, is all about keeping Americans terrified. So it was always couched in this like, the refugees are overrunning Europe. They don't know what to do with them. And they would just show all these really horrible images, and if any time a refugee commits a crime, it's like, oh, see, these violent, they're all terrorists, they're jihadists, and we would see then a lot of European countries are being very sort of nationalistic, and they don't want these foreigners in, and everything's, like you say, like about to, the tensions are rising. There's always tensions rising, and we don't want tensions rising here in America, so you got to let me keep you safe, because American is very isolationist, and because only 4 of our states border a country that doesn't speak English. That's why Mexico is the big scary, we can't let, and there's an undertone of racism. They're brown, scary, violent, poor, drug dealers, and then the brown terrorists are coming. So there's this undercurrent of racism, and so look what the brown terrorists did and are doing in Europe is kind of this, I'm generalizing, of course, because it's a big country, but that's sort of how the media pushes it, and definitely the politicians jump on board with that.
And you can already see that in which language the media uses. For instance, why are we speaking of a refugee crisis? Shouldn't we actually speak of a humanitarian crisis? Yeah. And already you have a completely different color of this whole thing. Because suddenly it's not that the crisis is not something that is in need of help. the crisis is the refugee, suddenly. So we need to solve the refugee, not what made the person what turned the person into a refugee. And for instance, in Germany, we had the phrase constantly used, the boat is full. And in German, a boat is really referring to a small naval vessel, not a ship or anything. And already there you have this association. Germany, as a country, is not a boat. Germany is a freaking Luxusliner.
Yeah.
And to even attempt to verbally equate Germany to a boat already, you can see this, how every anti-migration talk usually involves diminishing the people who are already in the country. So they need to make the people feel small, feel vulnerable, feel bad, so they can then project the negative feelings onto those newcomers who have it even worse than them. And this is how it's really been happening here. And then, of course, we had the great situation in Cologne, where the media was amazing. And but really, so we have two very different situations in Germany. I think it's important even for lefties to understand this. So I live in a big city, not even that large for German context. We don't even have 1 million of inhabitants. But it's full of foreigners. You have probably, at least it feels like 50% migrants here in the city. And it's one of the most peaceful places you can live in. It's a lot of bustling around. A lot of poor people live here too, working class people, though they are slowly being pushed off the city through the rising rents and such. And but you have Jews, Muslims, Christians, atheists, Buddhists, Hindus. No matter what, we have temples for every religion here, and really nobody cares. In fact, most people really like the fact that they can just say, wait, today I want to go to eat Indian, real Indian food made by actual Indians. Tomorrow I want to go to eat some African food by actual Africans. And when we go to school, we have mixed classes of every nation. It's great because you always pick up some words in different languages. For instance, I had like 6 Turkish kids in my class when I was in school. So you just pick up some Turkish words here and there, and automatically your horizon spreads a little. But that's only the one part. The other part, and this is again something we need to remember, a lot of the anti-immigration rhetoric and the voting for the right-wing parties comes from Eastern Germany, or at least it seems that way. And people need to understand why it is, and I think there is a lot to learn about even for Americans or for everyone else. So Eastern Germany, before reunification, was the second largest economy in the Eastern Bloc. That's something. It was inherent in producing wealth for IKEA. A lot of the IKEA factories for the European product line were in the GDR, in the DDR.
I didn't know that.
And they produced cheap products for the Western markets. So after reunification, which wasn't really a reunification, it was more of a hostile takeover, if you want. Maybe a bit exaggerated, but just to paint a picture. The eastern economy of Eastern Germany was completely deconstructed, sold out, and carried over to the West. So at 1 year you had a decent economy for European standards. You had nothing left, and so you have all these, especially in small towns, so they had maybe like 5,000, 10,000 inhabitants that lost 90% of the population since reunification, because all the young people went away because there's no work left there. There's no perspective for them. They have been constantly losing, basically, for 30 years. And what then the German state did is that they took a large group of refugees and they put refugee camps in the middle of those towns. And those people who were already very angry in the first place started saying, how come on, you have no money for us, and you build this camp for these people who don't even speak our language. We are only old people here, nobody has any money, all the young people are gone. If something happens, who will care for us? and nobody took them seriously. And so these right-wing populist parties come and tell them, no, we take you seriously. Migrants are the problem. Vote for us and we will save you. And those people, it doesn't even matter if they believe them, but those are the first people who talk to them on a level, who take them seriously. And I think this is really important if you think about the Rust Belt or even other parts of the United States who voted for Trump, who have been losing for so long, and the first person to talk to them like a real human being, they go out and vote for them.
Well, you bring up such a great point. I mean, that's the first thing that's popped into my mind, is that's the thing the Democrats seem to miss. They just focused on, and it's not a wrong thing to look at. Trump ran on this very xenophobic, racist platform. All they saw was that. And
it's an easy target then.
It's an easy target, and everyone acted like there was no racists in America until just now. Like, the hate groups have been there, the Klan has been there for centuries. I mean, not to minimize it, but the thing that they kept skipping over was all these disenfranchised people. And, I want to do a video because I just found out about this, is somebody put a map of where the opioid epidemic is also hard, a lot of areas where they lost jobs and went from Obama. They voted for Obama twice and then voted for Trump, which I think is part of the disenfranchisement. When there's no jobs, then drugs come along. I'm not worth anything because capitalism doesn't give a shit about me. And the Democrats didn't come talk to them. 8 years of Obama didn't make their financial situation better. And Hillary called them deplorable and, oh, weird, they didn't vote for her. And it's not surprising that I did not know that about Eastern Germany. And I lived in Germany for a year when I was a child, and I had no idea. And then, oh God, it's so funny. The problems of the world come down always to basically some of the same things: greed, war, which is usually for greed and power, and the inequities of these things, and the powerful squeezing the 99% for their own benefit, that creates all these problems, which the thing I always come back to, the solutions, like a Green New Deal fixes. If we stop bombing the Middle East, guess what, everybody? There's not a lot of refugees because people don't want to leave. People didn't want to leave Syria.
Yeah.
And one of the things that caused the refuge, there was climate refugees leading up to the Syrian civil war because of mass drought. Like, this is all connected, and the solution can fix all of these things.
Well, the problem is, then again, it's a cultural problem, an ideological problem, because we live in a capitalist society or a bourgeois Protestant society, and we believe, on a cultural basis, we believe that hard, honest work will move you along, and your goal is to achieve as much wealth and success as possible, and that you shouldn't ever sin. And you can't even fault corporations for wanting all the money, for governments to squeeze all the money out, because that's what they were taught that they are supposed to do, because that's the economic system that we live in. So it's a very inherent problem. If you like, I don't know if this topic is maybe a little bit harsh, but I would really like to talk about New Year's night in Cologne. I don't know if you remember 2 years ago, there was this big news that refugees attacked German women on station New Year's night. There was this big kerfuffle, and all the media was about it, all the national media, and
yeah,
it was this big thing.
I heard a little bit about that, but I don't really know the specifics of it.
Yeah, because that's a very interesting thing what happened, or at least what we can reconstruct what happened. So it was New Year's night at Cologne, and suddenly the media started reporting that women were being groped and assaulted and attacked by Muslims, by refugees, and really just the media just escalated from there. The stories became more gruesome, and there was talk of rape and of mass of men attacking single women, and the police not intervening, and then at some point it stopped. And that was basically the narrative that was kept in the media, I think. I don't think the narrative was ever really sufficiently changed on international media, at least. In Germany, it was a bit more complicated because, in fact, German journalists, feminist groups, women's rights groups all want to know what actually happened there. How big was this? How many people were involved? How was this different from any other night in any other city? What was really interesting is that the Cologne police and the state attorney of the state both refused to give out statistics, both about that night and of prior New Year's nights. So we didn't know even how big this was. And what then slowly started to come out is that we, for instance, for a period of time, for about 1 hour, there was on Twitter, on Facebook, on multiple social medias, probably Reddit and whatever, there was a message that you could go and grope and steal from German women at the Cologne station, central station, and the police would not intervene. And this was spreading on the internet for about an hour until it was found by the police and cut. But it took them 1 hour, which is kind of long, especially if it's an ongoing situation. The police was there, cameras were there. It's not like this is something they had no idea how to react to, but they didn't react. So we know that the police for at least an hour didn't come to help anyone. And we also know that this was in vast majority cases of robbery, of theft, of pickpocketing. And it's a bad but common tactic for thieves to work in pairs or in small groups. And if the target is a woman, a common tactic is that one would approach the woman from the front, start harassing her or groping her or whatever, just to take her attention, make her focus towards him, and then another guy would come from the back, grab that person, run away. She would turn around, the guy's already away, and the other guy would run away at the same time as she turns around. So it was just it's just a tactic, a criminal tactic. Right. And we assume that this is what happened originally, and the police didn't intervene. Then the international media came in and started, because the German media was late at that party. They started half an hour later than the international media to report on this, and then the narrative was already written. So in the aftermath, what we know is that about 30 people went to court over this, went to various court cases. Almost all of them were about theft, robbery. And I think there were 2 refugees among them. There was an American guy, there were Spanish, Italians, a lot of Germans. It was a whole mixture of people who were involved in this. It weren't Muslims, it weren't refugees specifically. It was a whole colloquium of people who were at least those cases that came to court. And so it seems that this was a lot of projection involved in this. I'm not saying that nothing happened. Of course, something did happen, but it was definitely not a Muslim ritual, which was then spread around, or an attack, an organized attack by refugee groups or terrorist groups. At least we have, to this day, no evidence, and the police still won't give us statistics on that night and the nights of the years before. So we know was this even larger than what normally happens? Because German police is kind of known to close an eye on cases of groping. I think this is something that internationally is sadly quite common. It's not really considered a crime in most cases. Well, it's just a guy that groped you. It's not that bad. Life goes on. And this is probably what happens. I mean, what the feminist groups brought light to after that was like Oktoberfest. In Oktoberfest in Munich, every year there are hundreds and thousands of cases of rape.
Oh, that's awful.
In the area and around the area. Right? You have a lot of really, really drunk people who are really drunk. A lot of shit happens, but nobody ever talks about it.
Right.
Because it's a big tourist attraction. Sure. Why would you talk about something like that?
Right. But it's bad for business to say all these awful rapes and crimes and abuses happen at Oktoberfest. It's supposed to just be this big fun beer drinking party. So what if I understand correctly, going back to the Cologne thing, what you're saying is there was just a lot of crimes that were happening, but they were committed by all different types of people, and the media made it seem like there was some sort of coordinated Muslim attack on German women.
Yeah, that was, at least as far as I watched, this was basically what was presented by TYT back then, and which made me really angry. And that was the reason why I stopped watching TYT, basically, because I thought it was really like a backstab for any progressive to not even be a little bit critical about the story and just repeat what others say, not even look what German journalists are uncovering at the same time about this. Yeah. And again, it was probably nothing until the police did intervene, the message was spread on the internet, and people just started going there to try it out.
Wow. Because
there are always crazy people and assholes who just hear, oh, I can do this? Okay, I will do that then. Who don't think about the consequences or what they're actually committing, what kind of crime they're committing towards other human beings. And it's a big scandal, but it was never, even in Germany, never really resolved the way it should have been. But this, sadly, is really common for Germany over the last couple of decades. We have had Nazi terrorist group running around, murdering 40 people over a dozen years.
Really? And no one's reported that?
No one's reported that, even though we had the whole examinations of the police live on TV, because as it turned out, the police was involved, the German secret agencies were involved, the chancellors, both Schröder and later Merkel, knew of this thing happening and nobody told anyone for 15 years. We only found out about this because that group eventually killed a German policewoman, and then the media starts rolling in. Before that, all those murders that happened, we never even know these murders happened, that there were terrorist attacks. It just wasn't reported.
Well, that's the thing that's so, I mean, this happens in America too. When a white supremacist commits a hate crime, they're never called a terrorist. It's always just a lone wolf, you know, and if a Muslim person commits a crime, they always have ties to this mosque and that mosque, and I'm always like, so you're trying to tell me this white guy never went to church?
Yeah.
He never went to church?
He doesn't have any friends, was never in the club.
Never? Because let me tell you something, I went to church as a kid. I went to, like, we've all been to a church. I mean, like, if that's the religion you grew up in, or even just that was the prevailing religion in your community, you went to some church, some friend had a thing there, you went to a wedding there, you went to Christmas Eve Mass or something. But yet in the Western media, that person is never described as a white Christian terrorist the way the Muslims are. And that's fascinating to me that no one's reported on that. I would love it, you know, if you want to send me some articles about that. I would do a separate video on that.
I can already, even for your viewers, before you can do that, it's NSU, Nationalsozialistischer Untergrund, which is National Socialistic Underground. There's a lot about it. I mean, again, everybody was involved, everybody knew about it, and nobody stopped it, and we don't even know the whole scale of this until now, and nobody was really punished for that.
How much do you think the denial of it, I'm just guessing here, how much do you think the denial of it is Germans and the German government going, we don't want to be associated with Hitler and that past, that we're just going to be like, nope, and just make it seem like there's just a handful of neo-Nazis, but they're just crazy guys, and they try to do it.
It's nice that you say this. This was exactly the apology that the Kanzleramtssprecher of Angela Merkel, the spokesperson for Angela Merkel, brought to the court. He said Merkel became chancellor in 2006. It was the year of the World Championship of football, and the motto of the World Cup,
which was what, 2010?
2006. It was the year Italy became world champion. Yay! And he said in front of the court that because of the World Cup, and the motto of the World Cup was the world is guests with friends, you cannot have this message spread to the world, and at the same time have a Nazi terrorist group mass murdering people in Germany. You can't have both messages at the same time, so they just wouldn't. That's why they didn't talk about it. This was his excuse in front of the how do you call that? The committee, when the government parts are questioning other parts of the government, or what do you call it?
Like a commission, or a the way like we have like Senate hearings and stuff like that.
Yes, it's like a hearing. It's like a hearing, but it's like a cross between a hearing and a proper court, where there are actually judges there and lawyers. And again, this was in front of that. This was their explanation, and this is kind of crazy, especially if you think about it that way. Especially right-wing groups tend to be very infiltrated by the security agencies of our countries. So you usually have a lot of people inside who actually would know what's going on. I mean, I think this was also in the 1990s. There were a couple of cases in the United States, the Oklahoma bombing and such, where there were, I think, speculation about that there were people inside of the secret agencies themselves that maybe have known about it because they had infiltrated organizations and such. I don't remember. Maybe I'm just confusing or mixing up stuff. But in general, you have these groups that are infiltrated by police, basically, or by secret agents, who are still allowed to commit those crimes. It's just a bit scary, because I'm a migrant. I don't want to live in a country where you can just kill a lot of migrants and nobody cares until you kill a German policewoman. It feels kind of wrong. I don't know. It feels scary.
As well it should.
And again, it's sad that this never broke the story, really. Even in Germany, even though it was in the newspaper basically every day, almost nobody talked about it. And it's crazy for me that this basically didn't arrive in foreign countries, because it was so big. So big.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing too. And it also speaks to the corporate power structure. So when you have an event like the World Cup, you've got all these corporate sponsors, I'm assuming Adidas, whatever, Coca-Cola, BMW, whatever, who are spending millions of dollars for this sponsorship. So they don't want anything negative. Keep that hidden, keep that under wraps. And if it does come out, make it seem like, a lone wolf, one or two bad, the old bad apple thing. So it's not surprising to me.
Well, it's a crazy guy. If it's a Muslim, it's Muslim ideology. Otherwise, it's a crazy guy. I mean, they're all crazy,
right?
Who commit such crimes. So that's not even a sentence that makes any sense, because who cares? They're all crazy.
yeah, they're all crazy, and they've joined crazy organizations like a neo-Nazi group and an extremist Muslim thing. They're crazy. They're preaching hate and awful things. And if we're going to admonish anyone in the Muslim community that does this as this big global Muslim terrorist organization, then you're trying to tell me, and they hide on the internet and they got secret cells. Well, so do the goddamn neo-Nazis, man. They, and in this country, they're heavily armed.
Also, by now, let's just face it. If the Muslims want to take over Europe with acts of massive terrorism, there are enough Muslims in Europe by now that they could do this. They could have done this 10 years ago. They never tried. They don't care. People should just go out and talk to some Muslims, make some Muslim friends, and just realize they are actually, the term Muslims for most of them doesn't really mean that much, other than some traditions. Yeah. And really they're just people like everybody else, and they listen to the same music, they dance the same,
look at
they eat the same stuff.
I mean, look, I have a little Christmas tree in my apartment, okay? Am I a Christian extremist? I consider myself probably Buddhist, if anything, but I like Christmas trees. Am I celebrating the birth of Christ? Not really. I mean, not really. I mean, and how many people are like that with anything they grew up with? Like, I grew up watching American football. I don't really watch as much, but it was a part of the culture. You get together on Sundays. High school football is Friday night. Saturday you watch college football. Sunday is the NFL. It's a part of the culture. The whole family gets together. You tailgate. You get together with your buddies. It's a big. When I played high school football, the whole town came out to watch us play.
Yeah, sure. It's a big celebration.
It's a big celebration.
Basically.
So that doesn't mean I'm in favor of covering up brain damage.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the other thing too. I know so many, and when people say, yeah, but some of them are violent extremists, I say, yeah, so there's Christian extremists. So most people, especially refugees, came to a Western country, be it Europe or the United States or Australia or Canada, and they want a better life for their kids like anybody wants.
I mean, no nation ever has such a root immigration as the United States has. It's so funny. Oh, I talked to a Chinese person, I think it's Chinese, he was Chinese, and I don't know if you heard it, in Italy, a very right-wing party currently is at power, and they're very, very racist in their rhetoric. And he was like, it's a Chinese guy in China telling me, you Italians need to stop this. You guys have swarmed all over the world. There's not a place in the world where there aren't Italians with their pizzerias and restaurants. And you're the last people to hate on, should hate on migrants. And there's, of course, it's a joke, but we're talking about China here. It's not like it's the most open country in the world. Yeah. And but all these things are used to divide us. All these little tiny differences who mostly come down to abstract ideas someone had at some point. And we all lose the basic truth that we are all human beings and all the same. We have all the same desires, the same needs, the same fears, the same pains. And so if we give us a chance, we usually don't get disappointed. Usually. Sometimes we get disappointed, of course. But it is more to do with the individuals than with different cultural backgrounds.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Well, Danny, before we wrap up here, what any final thoughts you want to leave with everybody?
Not so much a final thought, but I would ask you a follow-up question on our last interview, which was about where we briefly talked about Ocasio-Cortez. And I just wanted to ask you, so since she is now a couple of months has passed since that election, is the United States already a communist dictatorship, or or is still everything running same old?
No, she's just roaming around with her hammer and sickle through Congress, making everybody wait in bread lines. I mean, that's all Ocasio-Cortez is doing. Yeah, she's turning. It's nuts. It's just communism has run amok, and it's horrifying. And now we're gonna make our hockey team take steroids and beat everybody. So it's pretty brutal. No, she's doing great. You know, the thing about Ocasio-Cortez is, I don't live in New York, so I didn't get a chance to vote for her, but I absolutely support her, and I think we just should do the thing that I talk about, which is like, I think it's great she's bringing up the Green New Deal. I think it's great that she's live tweeting the congressional, the congressional freshman orientation has all these lobbyists and no labor representation. I think that's fantastic. I don't like that she joined the Progressive Congress to just back down and roll over and let Pelosi become Speaker of the House. So I think and it's so great, her responses and stuff on Twitter when they make fun of her for the clothes she wears. I mean, she's really, doing a great job, and we need to support her when she is doing a good job, and when she, we got to make sure. My hope is that she doesn't get bought out. That's my hope, because I know how it works in America. They either threaten you or they buy you. And I know how, and it's not, when evil comes, it never comes, it's not a big demon. It's not a guy with fangs going, it's some nice person that's a friend that says, look, here's a little bit of money. We support everything you're doing. Just, let's not talk about that thing just yet. I mean, we'll get to it. But right now, let's just not go, let's go easy on the Medicare for All talk. And we'll get, and that's how it happens. And then she goes, well, I want to be reelected. I need this donation. Yeah. That's my fear, because I've seen it happen time and time again. She seems like a person of conviction, but I don't know her personally. So
a great German,
Go ahead.
A great German comedian once said that the great achievement of capitalism is that capitalism actually, makes gifts to its greatest critics. So if you are successful in criticizing capitalism will respond by making you rich. So making you part of the problem. And this is how it's a joke, but I think it's very true. It's a very true joke with a very true core. Very core truth in it. That, it's a problem. And I think none of us is completely safe from that.
No. Because look,
nobody is 100% uncorruptible. It just doesn't exist.
It's and if you get someone in a tight position, I mean, I think about, before I foreclosed on my house, when I was staring down potentially filing for bankruptcy and potentially losing my home. I ended up having to do both of those things. If someone would have come to me, now I wasn't doing this show. This was back in 2009, 2010. I lost my home in 2010. But 2008, 2009, 2010 is when I went through that whole process, that battle. Had somebody come to me and said, and anyone at that point would have said, Graham, do this game show or do this sitcom where you talk about how stupid socialists are and isn't capitalism great, and we'll pay you, $200,000 an episode.
Yeah. No question.
I would have probably done it, if they would have been like, yeah, and it's funded by, ExxonMobil's paying for the show, and we got to, you got to drive around in this new car and talk about how great it is and show you gassing up and thumbs up. I might have probably done it. It's hard to guess, but that's how it can work, is they buy you. Which in some ways is even worse, because if they crush you, at least you can say they're crushing me. You can point them out. You can say they're coming after me. I don't want Julian Assange to die. I hope it's awful. But if they do kill him, he becomes a martyr.
Yeah.
Look what they can do.
In some way, he already is.
Yeah, in some ways he already is, and people are finally starting to wake up to the fact that if they can do it to him, they can do it to everybody. I hope they get him out of there. I hope he gets rescued. I hope he becomes healthy again, because it sounds like they're trying to just starve him and kill him, which is horrifying. But
so many reports on his mental health issues also. I mean, he has been imprisoned basically for so long.
He's a political prisoner. He's been a political prisoner since 2012. What else would you call it? He can't leave. He's in prison. I mean,
for doing journalistic work.
And this is horrifying. What is even more horrifying is if they gave him $1 billion and he dismantles WikiLeaks, and then he just goes out there and whistle blows against, Pepsi Cola for taking water or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, Coca-Cola isn't bottling correctly, and that would be horrifying. That would be horrifying.
But since the establishment hates him so much, maybe he actually is uncorruptible. Maybe they tried and they couldn't corrupt him, and maybe that's why they hate him so much now. Maybe, who knows?
I firmly believe that. I think they've tried every possible tactic, and that's why they know he's incorruptible, and they're like trying to they are literally trying to kill him. The government, the NSA, they want to kill him. They're actively trying to kill him. They've had break-ins in the Ecuadorian embassy, and that's what they're trying to do.
And they have killed his character. I mean, people hate him. There's so many people hate him by now. It's so disgusting.
They've done a good job of killing his character. They smear you. That's what they do. So, well, I appreciate your question here. It's great talking to you here from now communist-occupied America, thanks to Ocasio-Cortez. Dos vidania, brother.
Tavares. Comrade.
Well,
if you want, we can do this again in spring, talking about the NSU, the Nazi group here in Germany.
Yeah.
I think this could be a very interesting talk to listen a little bit about that, if you want.
Maybe that's what we'll do next month, if we can have a separate conversation about this organization. Whatever you want to talk about, man, we'll talk about it. This is your time. So Thank you so much, Danny, for supporting the show, and everybody out there watching. If you want to be a part of this thing, which is really cool, go to patreon.com/Graham Elwood. And Danny, what would I say? Dankeschön and Guten Abend.
Dankeschön.
And what's the other one? Ausgezeichnet. That's.
Ausgezeichnet. Yes, it's good.
I know about 7 to 10 German words I could maybe say. All right. Well, thank you.
Stay well, Graham.
Thank
you. Peace.